Alrighty, here we go again. Let's see, 6, 7, 8. I can't remember what day this is. Oh well. Let's see, we're going to start off with the chapter called Display. It is on page 123 if you'd like to follow along. Is the whole world really looking? So the author, I always say like a little phrase or a sentence right after I give you the chapter title, and the author puts a little quote up there each time. And I'm wondering if there's any connection from the quote to what's going on in that chapter. So let's see if we can figure that out this time. So the author, I'll say it again, says, is the whole world really looking? So let's think about that. Leanna combed her hair, her long wet hair, out on the open front balcony of their house where the breeze smelled sweet as olive oil. Up the road, white sheets ballooned like parachutes from neighbors' rooftops' clotheslines. She wondered if Jackson had kissed another girl in the same movie theater by now. She tried to remember the way his crisp shirt collar stood up against his neck. She wondered if Claire had a new best friend. Her recent letter on a Blue Air letter sheet didn't say so. Far off, Leanna could see a girl with red hair running at the refugee camp, carrying something large in her arms. Was it Nadine? Then Poppy called her back inside. Please, he said urgently, don't be so public about it. You're making a display. Comb your hair in the bathroom. Comb it in your own bedroom, but don't do it out there with all the taxis and shepherds can see you. Sometimes he sounded as if she were breaking his heart. Leanna's father still talked about shepherds as if they were everywhere. Now and then an ancient shepherd in a dusty brown cloak would pass by Sitti's house up in the village, tapping a wooden cane against the stones. He didn't even turn his head to notice Leanna and Rafik staring at him from the doorway. All he cared about were his goats and sheep with painted red or blue bottoms so he could find them if they got mixed up with other animals. Maybe his own dusty memories followed him up the path. But Poppy acted as if their modern apartment on the Ramallah Road was still surrounded by shepherds. Poppy saw what used to be there. Maybe, Leanna thought, he's afraid a shepherd will fall in love with me and come ask me for my hand. I will never, ever give my hand away. Even the phrase disgusted her. So what does that mean, giving her hand away and asking for her hand? Sometimes she heard her father say, "We are Americans," to his relatives when she walked the village streets alone just for exercise, pretending she was giving Jackson a tour, or when she flipped the round dial on Sitti's radio, or when she slouched in the corner of Sitti's room with a book in front of her face. Americans? Even Poppy, who was always an Arab before? Of course, there was never any question about their mother being an American, but Rafik and Leanna walked a blurry line. Leanna tipped from one side to the other. The minute Poppy told her to stop combing her hair on the balcony, she toppled onto the American side thinking, if I were at home on a beach, I could run up and down the sand with just a bathing suit on and no one would even notice me. I could wear my short shorts that I didn't bring and hold a boy's hand in the street without causing an earthquake. I could comb my wet hair in public for 100 dumb years. All right, that was the chapter. So the quote is the whole world really looking? I think it does fit. I think that's Leanna's question. Is the whole world really watching her? Or everyone? The next chapter is called Lit Up. She turned a corner and everything changed. So that makes me wonder what change is coming. You keep getting me in trouble, Leanna's friend Sylvie sighed in one of their lunchtime walks from school to the falafel stand. That morning, Leanna had urged Sylvie to defy the directress, who ordered her to remove a tortoiseshell clip from her hair. Leanna whispered, "This is getting ridiculous. Say no." And Sylvie peeped, "No," in a thin voice that caused her to get a detention note. She would have to stay after school. Sylvie pointed to the Armenian man with the giant keys dangling from his belt, who locked the door of the Armenian quarter every night at 10 p.m. He opened it again at 6 a.m. Sylvie said, "Last week I was running up the street fast from a movie at the British Library. This man saw me coming, but the time on the clock was 10:01, and he locked the door right before I reached it. He would not let me come in. I had to walk to the house of my aunt in the new city to sleep. A long walk in the dark. My mother was so mad, she said I couldn't go to the movies anymore." Leanna marched up to the man and asked, "Why do you need to keep that door locked anyway? No one else's neighborhood is locked." He stared at her as if she were a thief digging for secrets. "Security," he said gruffly, and turned away. She hated that word. Now Sylvie was embarrassed in walking back to school early without her. Maybe it was an excuse. She still had some leftover homework to do. Just outside the quarter's huge door, on the path to Jaffa Gate, sat the Sarandini family's famous ceramic shop. Poppy had pointed it out to Leanna as a landmark. The Saradinis painted beautiful tiles, lamps, and bowls with blue interiors and scenes of Jerusalem, domes, towers, and pointy trees. Leanna, feeling suddenly bereft without her friend, what does bereft mean in that sentence? Feeling suddenly bereft without her friend, saw a crowd of tourists heading in there. So she turned and followed them as if she were part of their group. No one noticed her. The tourists began buying like crazy. They pointed and flipped credit cards, speaking a language Leanna couldn't identify. Danish? Dutch? Leanna's eyes fell upon a small, shapely green lamp, exactly the color of the green grass she missed back home in the United States. Who would have ever thought about grass when you had it? Who ever thought about missing a color? The lamp would be perfect for reading in her bed. Then she looked at the price tag. She couldn't understand it because the writing was so fancy, like calligraphy. She motioned to a boy standing behind the counter with his arms folded near the reams of tissue paper and stacks of cardboard boxes. He raised his eyebrows and walked over to her. He smelled like cinnamon. Leanna thought he might be 1 or 2 years older than she was. "Excuse me, how much does this cost? Can you read it?" He stared at her school uniform, speaking English smoothly. "You are not with them?" And he pointed to the group. "I am not." "You are with who?" Then she felt like Crispin Crispian in that old children's book by Margaret Wise Brown, The Dog Who Belonged to Himself. "I am with myself." He smiled broadly. "I am also with myself," he said. "I like to be with myself." His hair rolled back cleanly as a wave at the beach. "You do?" "Almost always." "You don't get tired of your own self?" "Never." "You don't get lonely for other people?" He looked around the crowded shop. "How could I? Other people are everywhere." And they both laughed. "Do you go to school?" Leanna asked him. "Of course," he grinned. "I am a scholar. I do my homework every day, but right now I am eating lunch." "So am I," she said. "I'm eating lunch too." Neither of them had any food. "By the way," he said, "I can't read this tag either." He called over a member of the Sandronini family who quoted something equally about 65 American dollars. Too much. Leanna still had to translate prices into dollars in her head for them to make sense to her. "Thanks. Do you want it?" he asked her. "Well, I want it, but I can't afford it. Maybe they'll have a sale." The Serendini man placed his hand on the cinnamon boy's shoulder. Has he been telling you stories? Has he promised to give all my precious cargoes away for half price? Leanna laughed and thanked them both and stepped back outside to Abad Musad's, where little cakes of falafel were frying. Abu Musa slid her crispy planets of falafel into pockets of warm, fresh pita bread, and Leanna bit down hard. She was starving. That night at dinner, she said, "Poppy, today I fell in love with a lamp." Interesting. Interviewing Sitti. Prepare for an unexpected visitor heading toward your door. Unexpected visitor. Back in the United States, Leanna's classes had oral history assignments when they were supposed to go home and ask their oldest relatives or neighbors what the world was like long ago. What did you eat? What did you do for recreation? How did your mother cure a headache? They could write the answers down or tape them, then choose the most interesting parts and compose a paper. Of course, Leanna always picked Peachy Helen, but Peachy would protest. "Honey, you think I remember that far back? I barely remember what happened yesterday. Let's just forget about it and share some scones with lemon curd. What do you say?" Leanna would open Peachy's dresser drawers, pulling out a silver bracelet engraved with tipis and canoes and dusty powder puffs, trying to jar her memory. Usually, she'd end up having to talk to Frank, their neighbor in blue overalls, who specialized in car engines and organic farming methods. He didn't remember much about childhood, or he wouldn't tell, but Sitti remembered everything. She even remembered when a Turkish tribe rode south past Jerusalem and the children were told to lie down in the ditches so they wouldn't be run over by the horses. The problem was Leanna could only have a deep conversation with Sitti if Poppy were present. In Arabic class at school, Leanna was just learning the colors Fida for silver, Uranjawani for purple. Anyway, Sitti loved when Poppy was present. She rubbed the back of his head or hand till he looked uncomfortable. He had been her last of 8 children, born when she was past the usual childbirth age. On Saturday in the village, with a light rain falling softly outside, Leanna tested her cassette tape and plopped down on a floor mattress beside Sitti, who was cracking almonds again by her fire in the oil stove. Leanna slipped off her blue Birkenstocks. Sitti picked one up, turned it over, looked at its sole upside down and said in Arabic, "It's too fat." "Tell me a story." "About what?" Sitti laughed. She offered Leanna an apricot. The whole world was a story. Stories were the only things that tied us to the ground. Because she knew Sitti liked the subject, Leanna asked for a story about angels. Poppy looked dubious even as he translated. He thought angel talk was foolishness. Sitti stared at Leanna's cassette recorder as if it were an animal that might bite her with its tiny teeth. A thread of faraway music floated past and vanished. Sitti placed both her hands over her own eyes as if she was casting a spell on herself and began speaking. "Your grandfather, my husband, who died so long ago already, used to come home with his pockets full of plump kind of dates, not those thin, dried up ones that make you thirsty even in your sleep. He would present them to me as if they were coins or golden bracelets. He knew I loved them very much. He would place them in a white bowl covered with a cloth in the cabinet, and we would eat them one at a time. And I am not ashamed to say we did not tell the children they were there, because 100 little children from everywhere were always passing through this house. And there would not have been enough of them to go around, you know? But also, we wanted them ourselves. Sitti laughed her throaty laugh. So one day, I was taking a nap as your grandfather traveled up to Galilee, and an angel appeared in my dream and said she would give me some important advice because she was an angel. How can I be sure of that? I asked her. I can't believe I was so rude to an angel, she said. I will soon appear to your husband, who is carrying luscious dates in his pockets, and I will ask him to share them with me, and he will not be able to say no. Check with him when he comes back. That will prove it. Now here's the advice. And she gave it to me. So the minute he returned, I said, Did you get any dates? And he looked sorrowful. Yes, he said, but as I was standing in the souk, the marketplace, a young girl with strange eyes came up to me and said, Please, sir, I beg you for food you are carrying in your cloak. And as she seemed to have some extra power to see through the cloak, since the dates were not visible, I felt obliged to hand them over. Then I couldn't find any more to buy before I came home. Leanna asked, What was her advice? What? Oh, not to buy the cow. Someone was selling a cow just then. We never have many cows around here, you know. There's only one right now down the road in Husani's courtyard. Most people like goat's milk better, but I always liked cow's milk better, so I wanted your grandfather to buy a cow that was for sale in the next village. He didn't want to. He didn't like cow's milk. Also, cows need more to eat than goats, and he didn't want it tied up in our courtyard at night, taking up all the room. So we didn't buy it. Good thing, because we heard it died only a few weeks later. So the angel saved us the trouble, and all we lost was a few dates. Sitti cleared her throat and smiled. She stared at Leanna meaningfully. Poppy was finishing his translation, and he still looked dubious. Leaning over to Leanna, Sitti stroked her hair the way you'd pet a cat or a dog. Always listen to the angels who find you, she said, and she placed 2 fingers in the center of Leanna's forehead and closed her eyes. So Leanna closed hers too. Maybe this was a charm. When Leanna's aunt had to go to the hospital because her legs swelled up, Sitti said they swelled because she was such a big and heavy head. When Poppy told her that had nothing to do with it, she said, What do you know? Your head is normal sized. If a bird pooped on a white sheet while flying over the clothesline, that meant bad luck. But if it pooped on your head, that meant your first child would be a boy. Sitti wouldn't wear socks because cold feet would help her live longer. She thought Leanna should stop wearing socks, but Leanna couldn't stand it. Sitti perceived messages everywhere. You will soon go on a long journey to a place hotter than this place. Beware of a bucket. Leanna liked this stuff. She made a whole new notebook for it. Poppy said he became a doctor because he grew up with such superstitious people. They drove me crazy, he told Leanna in private. I had to balance them out. Do you believe in heaven? Leanna asked Sitti on the day of their interview, and she answered quickly, Of course, it's full of fresh fruit. They took a short break to slice 3 Jericho oranges in half and share them. Sitti closed her eyes when she swallowed. Then she bustled around the room, muttering, sweeping the windowsill with her short-handled broom, straightening the bags of rice and flour and sugar on her shelves. She pulled a few strands of long hair out of her pink comb. What's she saying now? Leanna asked. Poppy said, I think she's reciting the bee's passage from the Koran. Leanna sang out, Ho! to get her attention again. Sitti jumped. Sit down, Leanna begged her. Please. Min falik korehon is one of the first phrases she learned. Leanna asked Sitti to tell more about her dreams at night, and she said, with a mournful expression, I dream of all the hard times I had in this life, and how mean the Jewish soldiers act to us. They don't even know who we are, And I dream of the way I felt when my most beautiful and beloved son," she paused dramatically, staring at Poppy, "went far away from me. I couldn't even see the tip of his shadow." Leanna's father liked this conversation less and less. Sitti ordered Poppy to give money to the poor before she died, and more money to the gravedigger and the woman who washed her body. She insisted the people who buried her should leave lots of space in her grave so she could sit up to talk to the angels. She didn't like to talk to anyone lying down. Leanna laughed out loud, but Poppy stood up, rubbed his hands together over the fire, and said, "Let's do something else."